Microsoft launched its Windows Phone operating system in 2010 with the goal of competing with Android and iOS, the two most popular mobile platforms. However, Microsoft ended the platform's support in 2017 following a few years of weak sales. There were other issues at play, even if the lack of apps is frequently pointed out as the primary cause of its collapse. We'll look at other reasons why Windows Phone didn't succeed in this video besides the dearth of apps. Origin. The first version of the Windows Phone was unveiled in 1995 and came with Windows CE, basically a toned-down version of main Windows for a mobile experience. And over the years they would gain more experience in the handheld world and refine their mobile version of Windows. And keep in mind that every phone at the time had different sizes and form factor OS, some used keyboards and some used pens. And Windows was the most popular OS used by phone manufacturers because of how flexible it was. You could have supported apps on your phone because it was a standardized OS and the developers knew what code to use. What made it fail? One of the leading factors of the Windows Phone failing is that it was late to the game. Years after Android and iOS had already established themselves as the industry leaders in smartphones, Windows Phone was released in 2010. The competitors had already established robust ecosystems with a vast number of apps, devoted customers, and development communities by the time Microsoft released Windows Phone. Windows Phone was viewed as a latecomer, and it would take a long time for it to overtake iOS and Android. And this was Steve Ballmer, CEO of Microsoft at the time. Keep in mind that we were already in the 2010s and Microsoft was putting outdated features in their phones like keyboards on the Microsoft Kin, which might have worked in the 2004. But not 2010 when the iPhone 4 would release and create massive hysteria among the tech world. The Microsoft Kin only lasted 48 days. The phone was surely going top fail when compared to other competitors like Android and Apple, which had more up-to-date and pushed to limits of computing power. Naturally, you get a little arrogant when you're a multi-billion-dollar business that at the time was dominating the tech sector and had millions of people at your altar. With Apple's introduction of the first iPhone with a touch screen, it all began. They essentially altered the rules of the game. As a result, rivals like Microsoft and Google had to change. Watch this extremely grainy video of Steve Ballmer, the Microsoft CEO at the time, acting like the world's most conceited and haughty person when questioned about the original iPhone.
Steve, let me ask you about the iPhone and the Zune, if I may. The Zune was getting some traction, then Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that?
$500 fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world. And it does.
When the Windows Phone eventually failed, Steve Ballmer came to realize his mistake when criticizing such a revolutionary product that still impacts technology to this day. Steve would go on to express his regret on the Charlie Rose podcast.
With hindsight, are there things I'd do differently? Of course.
Like what?
Come on, Charlie. I probably would have started us doing hardware earlier so that we could have been more effective in the phone business.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
just
kind
like
of
how Blockbuster laughed at the idea of Netflix and internet streaming and failed to adapt to the market and regretted their decision when Netflix got the last laugh. When launching a new product, timing is everything, especially in a market where competition is fierce. When entering a market, businesses must think about whether they can persuade customers to abandon more established firms. It could be challenging to acquire traction and build a presence when one enters the market too late. When Steve Jobs revealed the iPhone, he sold it as a sleek and intuitive invention that would change the game. Keep in mind, this was when smartphones had different form factor and didn't have much advantage over normal phones. Microsoft made shoddy and unsuccessful attempts to market Windows Phone. Customers were not given a strong enough explanation by the firm as to why Windows Phone was superior to other smartphones. Furthermore, Microsoft's reputation at the time was still linked to desktop computers, which made it challenging to gain trust in the mobile market. Another thing that made the Windows Phone fail was the lack of developer support and app support. Because of the platform's low market share and development challenges, developers were reluctant to devote time and resources to creating apps for Windows Phone. Consequently, the platform's app choices was restricted, which further reduced its market appeal. An important factor in a platform or product success is its developer community. Businesses must give developers the resources and tools they require in order for them to create applications and other software for their products. Companies should also provide support and make it simple for developers to create apps for their platform in order to encourage them to do so. The uniformity of the user experience across devices is one of the advantages of both iOS and Android. On the other hand, Windows Phone's fragmented user experience across various devices made it challenging for people to utilize and navigate the platform. It was also challenging for developers to make programs that functioned properly across all platforms because of this discrepancy. While the design of the hardware wasn't that bad and pretty consistent, the navigation was pretty confusing and hard to use due to the turnstile and tile aesthetic, unlike an iPhone or Android, which was much more simple, which had a home page and different widgets. But 3 months later, a new and improved Windows Phone would be released, which was more improved and sleek. But by then, the damage had already been done, and the Windows 7 phone was a laughingstock. No one cared to see if it was a good phone, because they had already proved it was bad with the weak image they portrayed and lack of actually supported apps. They were too late to the game and proved that Apple was a better quality option and would never gain the numbers they had in 2000s. Conclusion: it's actually a shame that the Windows Phone never reached the heights of its competitors like Apple and Android, because it's a genuinely good product and had a lot of potential. Some capitalized on some, not like the fact that you could actually connect it to a display and mimic a desktop experience. But now when you buy a new mobile product from Windows like the Surface Duo, it's going to be running Android, and Microsoft is far from the days of having a big chunk in the market share like in the 2000s. The Windows Phone is a distant memory from the 2010s and will never be as big as it was closed in the 2010s. It would have been cool to see the Microsoft Store go toe-to-toe with the Apple Store in its prime in the early 2010s. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, please subscribe.